Hi everyone, thanks very much for coming and welcome along to our Youth Action Careers Day webinar. I'm Beth Nicholls and I'm the Communities Outreach Officer for a project called Heathlands Reunited. And this project works with lots of different partner organisations within the National Park to conserve and protect the rare lowland heath that we find in the park. And I'm joined by quite a few of our partners today who have given up their time to come along and talk about their experiences of getting a job in their kind of chosen field, and to give you some tips for how you might go about getting a similar job as well. We've got some really good speakers today from really varied backgrounds, from conservation, education, planning, and also cultural heritage as well. So I'm really grateful to all of our speakers for kind of giving up their time today to come and talk to us. So you'll notice that you can't turn on your microphones or speakers because it's a webinar. So if you do have any technical difficulties, just let us know through the chat box. And we will be recording the webinar today, so you should be able to refer back to that via our website if you want to re-listen to it again, or share it with someone else if you think you found it quite useful. So how the day will run, we'll start off with some short presentations from each of our speakers, and then once everybody's spoken, we'll kind of open the floor to questions. So if you do have any questions, please just pop them in the question and answer box or in the chat box, and we'll do our best to try and record or to try and answer some of those as we're going along as well. And I would ask you to try and keep those questions kind of fairly general so that they're relevant to a lot of people in the webinar. And also, if you have any advice or any links that you think might be useful to other attendees, please do pop them in the chat box as well. And really our aim for today is for you to have an opportunity to talk to other young people working in your kind of the field that you'd like to be moving into or would like to progress within, to ask them about their experiences. You know, what did they do to get to where they are now? What things do they think help them? What advice would they give to you to kind of get into a similar position? And really, by the end of today, we hope that you'll kind of come away from the webinar feeling like you know a little bit more about the kind of diversity of jobs that are available in the National Park, and to feel really positive and empowered that you can pursue the job that you've always dreamed of or that you've always been curious about. And hopefully this webinar will enable you to kind of feel a bit more confident about doing that. That's what we're aiming for today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to our first speaker, that's Rachel Johnson. She was once an apprentice with the Heathlands Reunited project, and after the apprenticeship she was lucky enough to secure a position with the National Park as well. So over to Rachel, who's going to tell you a little bit about her apprenticeship to begin with.
We did sort of things like water quality surveys with the RSPB and charcoal burns with National Trust and tree planting with Forestry England, so it was really varied, and we got to meet loads of people at different organisations, which was great. So as soon as I finished college, when I was at college, I decided I didn't want to go to uni, but then I also didn't want to work in an office. So at 18 I bounced around loads of different part-time jobs. I worked 7 days a week until I landed a full-time role as a maths specialist at a senior school. I worked there for a year, and then I started working in an autism unit at another school where I worked for nearly 4 years. I then spotted an advert for the apprenticeship in a local newspaper. So I just went along to the open day and thought it sounded up my street. So went for the interview and got the job. So I started this job in lockdown, and so I don't really know my full responsibilities yet. However, I know that managing volunteers will be something that is key in autumn. I know I do some surveying, I check out planning applications, practical work such as chainsawing and brush cutting, and I've also done things like cow checking when I've worked for other organisations, which is quite fun. So working for the South Downs National Park Authority is great because you can have a particular interest which isn't necessarily linked to your specific role, but then you can pursue it. So I'm really interested in sustainability, and my boss knows that. So I've been able to get involved in things to do with it, which like wouldn't be part of my everyday job. And so my advice for anybody wanting to get into the sector is to just say yes. Any opportunity, take it. You'll build up your CV, which is great, and you'll get loads of experience, meet loads of people, maybe find a new interest along the way. I'm really interested in dragonflies, and that's because of something that we said yes to during an apprenticeship. So just say yes to everything, and you'll get loads out of it. So that's all from me.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Really good to hear about those kind of unexpected opportunities that come up, you know, as you say, just by saying yes, and things that you think you might not like, sometimes you end up liking them, and that's why it's quite good to try and get experience, isn't it, or volunteering to find out, again, as Becky said as well, what you actually like about a role. So yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. So next up we've got Thomas.
My name's Tom. I'm a apprentice town planner for the South Downs National Park. I've been there nearly a year. It's been quite an interesting year. I originally was at university doing an IT course, but it wasn't really my thing, so I was looking for a bit of a change. So this kind of came up when I was looking around for apprenticeships and jobs. Applied and was fortunate enough to get the position. And yeah, it's been interesting. I've been able to work in a lot of different areas in planning and really kind of widen my knowledge of what planning is and how important it is to make sure that, you know, the South Downs stays as green and nice as it is. My kind of responsibilities in the department, it varies which kind of people I'm working with. At the moment, I'm mainly just picking up site notices, which gets me around the South Downs, which is nice because I get to see a lot of the you know, sights and scenes, and other bits are just kind of normal office admin, I guess. But you do learn a lot. It's like being at university, but you're learning more, you know, specific information relevant to your job role, which is always much nicer than reading out of a textbook. The best thing about where I work is just being able to get out and see such a nice area. I can't really count how many times I've been driving around the South Downs and looked out my window and gone, wow, this is such an amazing, you know, place to live and work. And I think by, you know, working with the South Downs, I've been able to really experience all that. And, you know, some top tips, I guess, for people looking for any position in any job, whether it be, you know, with the South Downs or you know, go for it, but make sure it's right for you. If you're not happy with what you're doing, make sure you are doing something that makes you happy, because that always helps. And yeah, don't be afraid to put yourself out there as well and just experience anything you can. And that's me.
Thanks very much, Tom. Do you find it tricky kind of balancing the college work with the kind of the job side of your apprenticeship, or is it okay?
Yeah, it's quite nice. The people I work with at the moment are really understanding of my college work. So if I say that there's a lot of college work to get done or have done by a certain time, they'll always allow, you know, time for me to work on it, and they'll help out where necessary if I don't understand a certain thing. So it's a really nice kind of communal work area. We all kind of help each other out where necessary.
Oh, that's great. I guess you've got, yeah, like a panel of experts on hand to kind of, you know, guide you really nice in your college work and stuff. That's a really nice advantage of doing the apprenticeship kind of and being in a work placement, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like having a tutor at my disposal at all times, which is nice.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Oh, thanks very much, Tom. So next up we've got Cameron.
My name is Cameron. I wear the blue shirt, which means that I am one of the sort of volunteer rangers. And what this means is that I don't get, it's a sort of a weekly event, obviously not at the moment, but a weekly event where myself and a group of other sort of volunteers head out to the national park and do sort of general clearance, or, you know, sprucing up the national park to what it should be, and sort of managing it and conserving it. But alongside this sort of voluntary work, I also am a youth ambassador, again in sort of a voluntary capacity. This basically means that I try and encourage the folks like yourselves to sort of come into the national parks, enjoy the national parks, and perhaps even volunteer yourselves. I've been in this, how long have I been in this? I've been here 4 years now. And I'd say that the sort of best part of working for the national park and doing the youth ambassador stuff is sort of the interaction with yourselves and with other communities and other groups who are so trying to sort of involve more young people into their own communities, because a lot of what has been going on at the minute within the world is sort of trying to create a more youth voice. And so that the capacity that I have as a youth ambassador is trying to spread that voice and to spread our goals and what we're trying to do to conserve and to allow people to understand young people more. The worst things about being one of the volunteers, apart from not being paid, but that's another matter, is basically the really hot weather like this today. That's probably the only thing I can really suggest that is the worst part of it, because days like this, you know, they're lovely, but they're incredibly hot, and you do sort of put up a sweat when you're clearing the scrub. But in terms of sort of top tips for people sort of wanting to do voluntary work, at the moment there is a lot of uncertainty about the jobs market at the minute, and the best way of getting experience is to volunteer in any capacity. And if you're really thinking about going into these sorts of careers, into sort of ranger sector or conservation, then volunteering is the way forward. And if you're also wanting to sort of spread the word like a lot of what other people have been doing, a lot of other groups, then again, I would agree with what Rachel said and just say yes to everything. Just, you know, go for whatever you want, and just, if you feel like you want to do that, just go for it and just do it. I mean, normally I am a history student, and conservation is more of a hobby or just sort of trying to get out and about sort of exercise for me, which I think is also a good thing, because the stresses of modern life can have a negative impact on people's physical and mental health. So I think doing sort of voluntary stuff within the national park, or volunteering in general, it's something sort of detached from your regular day job, as it were, is incredibly important. And that's my piece.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Cameron. What's your kind of favourite volunteer activity that you have to do? Scrub bashing, or what other things do you like?
Yeah, I think scrub bashing, because you can actually sort of see the differences that you make. You get a sort of small patch of ground which you sort of claim for yourself, and try not anybody else to get hold of it, so that you can have that particular section that you can clear, and that you can have the satisfaction of saying that, you know, you did that, or, you know, making sure that things are the way they should be, or the way they could be.
So it's quite a satisfying kind of task. Yeah. At the end of the day, you can see the kind of benefits that you're giving back, I guess, to the environment.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, thanks so much, Cameron. That's really, really interesting to hear a volunteer's perspective. And your kind of studies are not in this field either, are they? They're not in the environmental field, but as you say, it gives you something outside of what you're studying, and I think that is quite important as well. Yeah, indeed. Brilliant. Thanks, Cameron. So next up, we've got Hannah Kingsbury.
Hi everyone. So I'm Hannah. I'm the Cultural Heritage Officer for the Western Dales Landscape Partnership Scheme, which is based up in Cumbria. So this is a 4-year National Lottery Heritage funded scheme, which encompasses 21 projects, which are delivered by a number of officers, as well as a number of different partners, to unlock and reveal the hidden heritage of the Western Dales, which is part of the Yorkshire Dales extension from back in 2016. So I've been in my current position for about a year. So I'll go like roughly through how I kind of got to this point in this position. So after I completed my A-levels, I went to Durham to study history. And after my degree, I really just didn't know what I wanted to do next. So I decided to take a gap year. And in that time, I did sort of part-time jobs and some traveling and applied for lots of different jobs, still not really knowing quite what I wanted to go into. And then I saw an opportunity with the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority as the Historic Environment Apprentice. So I applied for that role, which was 2 years, and got it. And I finished that role last summer. And it's something that I've been aware of for a long time, was that quite a lot of jobs in the heritage field require sort of further learning, and particularly masters. So I decided to do a part-time masters in building history, because buildings was where my particular interest lay. So I decided that I'd want to increase my knowledge and potentially my employability through doing that. So the apprenticeship was such a great opportunity for me to get practical experience in the heritage field. It's so important for employers to show to employers that you've done something, especially as you progress through your career, and that way gave me a lot of general experience doing a lot of different things, as well as being paid, which is obviously a plus. So I worked in a multidisciplinary team, and was able to work closely with many colleagues while undertaking my apprenticeship. And I particularly focused on working with sort of community heritage projects, as well as working a lot on the historic environment record, which is where all the sort of historic environments, sites, monuments, finds, all that sort of stuff is recorded onto it. So there's a database which can be accessed as both a record and as a point of reference. So in my current job as Cultural Heritage Officer, I manage 5 of the cultural heritage projects, as well as working with a number of partners to help deliver their projects. I wouldn't say I have a typical day at all. Each day varies so much, but some of the activities I do range from sort of appointing consultants to deliver work. I'll be out and about training volunteers, working with partners, going on site visits, and it continues. So my time is mainly spent in the office, but I do manage to get out and about on site, and that mixture is something that's really important to me, and something that I want to continue through my career, really. So the projects that I manage are quite varied, and include sort of upland archaeology survey as well as excavations, to sort of dry stone wall and traditional farm building surveys, as well as sort of administering and setting up grants for restoration projects. So in the first year, I spent most of my time developing these projects and sort of getting used to the different processes, which has been quite challenging to begin with, but it's been really rewarding to see those projects through and to sort of meet targets and get things done. So the thing that I've most enjoyed really about my position, and I think it kind of appeals to sort of is apparent in most of these sort of jobs, is the variety of work, and how my days are so various. In terms of top tips, I agree with most of the other panelists and what they've been saying. I think it's just so important to show your passion and interest in whatever field you want to go into. And there's such a variety of ways of doing that. I know from experience of growing up in a rural area with limited public transport, it wasn't that easy to get involved in lots of different things, just on the basis that I just couldn't get there. But when I could and when the opportunities arose, I took part in local excavations and attended local talks, and just got involved in different things like that. And I found that the apprenticeship in itself gave me that just great workplace experience that employers were looking for. And as I think Rachel was saying about opportunities, I kind of saw the position of the apprenticeship through a social media post and sort of applied, not necessarily knowing where it would lead me, but it's something that I definitely don't regret, and it's definitely led me to the post I'm in now, because while I was an apprentice, I was involved in the development stage of the Westland Dales scheme, working on one of their projects, and that definitely enabled me to be aware of the job opportunity to which to apply. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Hannah. That's a really fascinating insight into a kind of different type of apprenticeship to Rachel's. It sounds like the apprenticeship kind of really helped you build your network as well as getting experience, would you say? Did you kind of get to, because you're working in quite a similar like location, are you?
Yeah, I'm working in just in a smaller area of the Yorkshire Dales, basically on a specific project. And I felt definitely you do meet different people from different organisations through doing something like an apprenticeship, and it definitely makes you more aware of different things and different directions to go into, which has been important.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thanks so much, Hannah.
No problem.
We've got Ralph up next.
So yeah, my name is Ralph Connolly. I'm a field officer and volunteer coordinator with Amphibian and Reptile Conservation. So we're based in sort of Hampshire and Surrey, but we also do some work in the South Downs National Park. My sort of career biography it's a little bit similar to what Cameron was saying earlier. I did a history degree, so I have a completely unrelated undergrad. And I came out of that and sort of realised I didn't particularly want to do teaching or academia or anything like that. I did a few sort of dead-end jobs in kitchens and things like that, and then realised that conservation volunteering was something that I was really enjoying. I was doing that at the time, and was potentially something that I could do sort of as a career. So I retrained. I went and did a countryside management diploma, and went from that to various sort of short-term contracts. So I did some ecology fieldwork, things like that. Some of them paid, some of them unpaid. But the breakthrough for me was getting a traineeship with the Wildlife Trust. So I was down in Somerset for a year with a paid traineeship. It wasn't very much, but it was enough to live off. And that also gave me the sort of the tickets that I needed, the chainsaw certificates, the brush cutter, the pesticides, and things like that. That was probably holding me back from getting a full-time job otherwise. So from there, again, I did a bit of contracting work, and then I got my position with ARC about 4 years ago. So I started off on a seasonal contract, just doing 7 months of winter sort of scrub clearance work, like Cameron was talking about. And then I got kept on after that. So I've now been with ARC for 4 years. My responsibilities are quite varied. So mainly my responsibilities are to run the field team when the reserve manager isn't out, and to organise all the volunteering side of things. So I run volunteer events and scrub bash tasks, things like that. I also do a range of sort of education things as and when they're needed. So we do a bit of schools outreach and that sort of thing. We do events, a lot of them within the Heathlands Reunited project. So we'll attend events with reptiles and amphibians and show people how to identify them and the sort of their habitat needs and what we do to conserve them. So it's quite varied. I also sit as part of the PR and comms group within ARC. So we do sort of that involves kind of press releases, creating stuff for social media, sometimes TV and radio interviews. So just recently we've done a piece on Countryfile, which was broadcast a couple of weeks ago. So it's really quite a broad range of things that I have to do, which I quite like really. And I'd say that's probably the best and the worst part of the job really, is that we're a small office here in the Weald, so there's only 3 of us full time. So that means we have to cover a lot of different bases, which is great because it means you get a lot of variety in your work, but it means you have to be very adaptable. You have to be willing to sort of just take something on at the drop of a hat really. But I do enjoy that sort of the flexibility of working. And then, yeah, in terms of sort of tips to succeed, I think other people have touched on similar things already, but it's perseverance and it's taking chances when they come up. This is a very competitive sector and a lot of people are looking to get jobs here. So you have to try and engage with as wide a range of opportunities as there are going. And in part, this is for your own benefit, just to work out what you want to do, because there are a huge range, as you'll hear, as people talk about what they actually do with their jobs. There's a huge range of jobs within land management and conservation. It's a wide sector. So it's a good way of establishing what you're really interested in. but it gets you known to people, and quite often those points of contact with people already working in the business can be a really good way into getting a job, because if someone knows you're a hard worker, knows you're committed, knows you're can be relied on, then that can be a really good thing to swing things your way when it comes to an interview or something like that. So yeah, that would be me.
Thanks, Ralph. Sorry, I did skip ahead and pick on you. Sorry,
All right.
You handled it very well. Yeah, and a common theme, I think, again, is that, you know, going into a completely different direction to that which you thought you were going to go into. So, and a little cameo from the puppy in the background there as well, which is always good. So next up is James. I'm very sorry. There you go, James. Sorry for mixing that up.
My name is James. I'm an assistant ranger in the Eastern Downs for the South Downs National Park Authority. I have held this post since March. Before that, I was an apprentice ranger with the Heathlands Reunited project, so I worked alongside Rachel Johnson, who spoke 5 minutes ago. And prior to that, I was a work experience student back with the Eastern team with the South Downs National Park. So originally, I was training to go into engineering, but I suffered from mental health problems and things like that, and I couldn't stand being inside all the time. And I did this work experience, and I thought, oh, it's amazing to be out and about all the time. So when I saw the assistant ranger post come up, I went for it, and I was very fortunate enough to, the apprentice ranger post came up, went for it, and I was very fortunate enough to get it. So here I am as assistant ranger. I've never been to university. My qualifications in conservation come from level 2 in environmental conservation that I did through the apprenticeship at Sparshalt College. So I've started at the bottom and I'm slowly working my way up the ladder, essentially. My responsibilities sort of vary from day to day. So assist with patch rangers in various practical tasks and sort of more management tasks, dealing with landowners. We also have lots of volunteers. So my responsibilities sort of are dealing with those as well. Because of lockdown, they haven't been out and about so much, but we've been trying to keep in contact with them on a sort of weekly basis. Having a favourite thing about my job, that's quite a difficult thing, really. I absolutely love the Downs, so I think knowing that my day-to-day work is involved in helping to maintain and restore the amazing habitat the South Downs are is probably, you know, up there. And the view from my office on most days isn't bad compared to what some people have to look at. So I'd say that's probably what my favourite bits are. Top tip wise, again, very similar to what everybody else is saying. Get involved where you can, volunteering, work experience, apprenticeships, internships, you know, just get involved, let people know you're keen. As I say, I didn't have many qualifications to start off with, but I just got involved, let people know I was keen and enthusiastic, and you'll get there. Conservation is a very competitive world, but, you know, if you're willing enough to go that extra mile, if you're getting involved here and you're getting involved there, you're getting to know people, they get to know you, you will get there. So my top tip, I suppose, is never give up. If you want your job enough, you will get there. So just take your journey to your dream job step by step and never give up on that. That's all from me.
Thanks so much, James. That's a really positive note to end your bit on, and I think we've all been there. We've all faced a lot of rejection trying to get where we are today, and it's important not to take it personally, isn't it, and to just keep going, and just knowing that it's just a sign that our jobs are really, really you know, enjoyable,
really sought after, and everybody wants to do them because they are amazing jobs. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so try to keep positive, and yeah, don't give up. That's a really
exactly. Yeah.
Thanks so much, James. Okay, and last but not least, we've got Kate Dziubinska.
So my name's Kate, and I'm a ranger for the South Downs National Park Authority, and I work in the northern area of the park, which is mainly heathlands and woodlands and a little bit of farmland. So I don't actually cover any of the downs that the national park is named after, but nevertheless, they're really rare habitats and amazing to work in. I've been in this post as a ranger for about 2 years, and then before that I worked as an assistant ranger for the national park, and that's where my journey with the national park began. Before that, I was doing an RSPB internship over in Suffolk at Minsmere, and that was sort of the second step on the ladder for me. So my journey in conservation started out at university. I was studying meteorology and oceanography, and I saw all the ecology students going out on their field trips every Friday and coming back with muddy wellies and reddened faces from the wind. And I thought, oh, that looks so much more fun than what I'm doing. So luckily I managed to change my course and started doing ecology. And that was quite academic. So the university that I chose was University of East Anglia in Norwich. And the course was largely academic. So it was building you up for a career in research. And even though I was getting out doing field trips, learning lots of zoology, things like that, it didn't really tick all the boxes for me. So every Wednesday we would have a day off, and I would go and volunteer with the Norfolk Wildlife Trust. And that came about by literally just ringing up the phone number on the website and saying, can I come out and help? And they didn't have any volunteer programs running, so they said, okay, just come out with the ranger every Wednesday. So that was great. I started learning loads about wildlife identification, about seasonal tasks like scrub clearing in the winter, where you're opening up areas that want to become woodland for things like wildflower meadows or heathland. And in the summer, doing things like repairing fence lines or doing surveys for wildlife. And that was a really good starter because it sort of opened my eyes to just what you can do in the job. That was never really explained to me in school. No one ever said you could do this kind of work as a job. So I was like, that's amazing. That's exactly what I want to do. So after university, I did a bit of digging and found out that you could get some internships or placements or apprenticeships with charities or organisations. So I chose one with the RSPB, which I mentioned before, and was really lucky to get it. And that was meant to be a year placement. And throughout that, I went to two different parts of the country. Well, they're quite similar, Norfolk and Suffolk, and then Lincolnshire. And yeah, I just got loads of experience working with the ranger teams there, kind of similar to what I was doing with the Norfolk Wildlife Trust, but full time. Unfortunately, it was an unpaid internship. So I still had to work at a pub in the evenings to, you know, feed myself and go on trips to see my friends and things. But during the day, I was getting so much experience and so much networking as well. So that was really useful. And then 9 months into that, I started applying for jobs. My line managers at RSPB were really encouraging of that. You know, as much as the internship was to help them with their day-to-day managing of sites and things, they really wanted me to progress and get a job afterwards. So started applying for jobs. I am a bit of a generalist, so I was applying for everything from estate work to ecological surveys to reserve work. And I saw the national park job, and one of my sort of things that I was missing from working on a reserve was the bigger picture and being able to work at a landscape scale with lots of different landowners and connecting up your land with neighbouring land. And the national park could offer that because it's such a huge landscape. So I went for that job, and luckily I got it. I went for an assistant ranger job, so that's the first rung on the ladder. And I moved from Norfolk to Sussex. That's another thing that I would mention. You have to be quite willing to move around the country. If you're not tied down and you've got the opportunity to move around, definitely do that because it's really interesting and exciting. And then after a couple of years working as an assistant ranger, I then progressed up to a ranger role when one of the jobs opened up. So that was really great because I got to stay within the organisation but take on more responsibility. So now as a ranger, I know everyone's been saying there isn't a usual day. It is really varied, but one thing I would say is that the work is kind of divided into seasons. So over winter, there's a lot of practical work. There's a lot of taking volunteers out, working with contractors, working with landowners and farmers. And then in the summer, there's a lot of surveying to be done and also invasive species control. And that's really lovely because you just get to spend the whole day outside, you know, working towards a common goal with people, and it's great. But then the national park is, we don't own any land ourselves, so everything we do is in partnership with landowners, whether that be a charity like the Wildlife Trust or whether it's farmers or big estates. So that's really interesting, those dynamics and the way that you have to speak differently or use different phrases or terms to be understood amongst different people. I also do a lot of things with the planning team and events and education and the access team who are the local authority. So yeah, the job is really varied and you get to work with lots of people. And I think that is probably my favourite part of the job actually, is getting to work with such a variety of people with different expertise. So the National Park has got over 100 employees, and then we also work with all our partner organisations and landowners in the area. And that wealth of experience that you can draw from is great, because you can work with someone on a project and then you can draw in different people with different expertise to work on the same goal. So yeah, that's definitely the best part of the job, is like drawing on that network and getting a common goal done. My top tips would be, as everyone has said, say yes to everything. If you're a generalist and you're not really sure what you like, try everything. You know, you can always try and then say, oh, I didn't really like that, and not bother with it. But if you try different things, you might find that actually your career path will do a swerve, and you might find, well, actually going out and spending a whole day in the open, getting all mucky with a bonfire and everything, that's not really for me. But then working on an event or with education with school children, that might actually tick the box for you. So yeah, try and do lots of different things and try to network as well. I think because this industry is so competitive, things aren't offered on a plate to you. You really do have to go in there and ask people for experience. So if there aren't any volunteer opportunities that are jumping out at you where you live, maybe get in touch with some conservation organisations and say, I know there isn't anything that you're offering on the internet, but is there any chance I could shadow one of your rangers, or is there any chance I could get some experience? And that's what really makes you stand out in your CV and also in your area. And you can get good references that way as well. So yeah, that would be my top tip.
Oh, muted. Thanks, Kate. I think, yeah, when I first started working for the National Park, I was really impressed by how much partnership working there is, and kind of, you know, working with lots of different organisations, RSPB, Wildlife Trust, and how, you know, that networking and kind of working as a bigger team than just your organisation, how important that is for, you know, not just conservation roles, but also outreach and education as well. So yeah, I think that's a really important tip.
Yeah.
So thank you so much to all of our speakers. You all kept beautifully to time. I'm very impressed. So now we've got our kind of Q&A session, which I'll open up to all of our panelists. We've had a really good question about whether people feel that a stronger educational CV, for example, a master's in conservation, is more important or more beneficial than, say, spending that year doing work experience or volunteering. So I don't know if any of our panelists want to chip in and answer that question. Hannah? Yeah, thank you, Hannah.
I'm happy to say something about this. Obviously, my experience within the heritage field is traditionally further education has been quite important in job specifications. But I think this is something which is hopefully now shifting finally, especially as more opportunities and ways of getting into your career is changing. I think there's more opportunities to have different ways through without going through that sort of educational route. So through apprenticeships and Historic England have sort of been working with a number of partners over the last few years, developing a number of different heritage qualifications at a number of different levels. So that's one way in. But I think, you know, the key thing is, I think work experience has benefited me in my career more than my education so far. But that's my own personal experience. I don't know what else is different.
I think that's probably key, isn't it? That it does vary by the exact kind of role that you want to do, and you know, sometimes it is about what opportunities are available and you know, your network as well. But obviously qualifications can be important, and for certain employers they potentially, you know, wouldn't consider someone without a degree or without a master's. So it does really vary on the role, I think. But interesting to hear that, you know, you feel that work experience was more important for you. Ralph, did you want to come in and say something?
Yeah, it's just sort of building on the same theme, really. But I think I'd say it's about balance. So you want to have, obviously, you want to have an academic background. That helps. That shows you can study. That shows you can apply yourself. But if you have someone going for a job who's purely got academic experience, then in many ways they'll look weaker than someone who's actually applied that. So I think it's trying to be somewhere in the middle and having some of both, rather than being too weighted to either extreme. But as a counterpoint, that I did put an answer in the chat. I mean, one of the other aspects is it'll vary from job to job. And so one of the jobs that we employ every year is we take on seasonal field officers. Now that job is pretty much entirely practical. It's just you're out on site with us every day of the week clearing scrub. So it may be great that you've got an MSc in herpetology, but to be honest, from my point of view, looking at someone's CV, that's actually less relevant than the fact that they spent, say, 6 months up the top of Snowdonia doing scrub bashing there. That's what gives me a better idea of whether they're capable of doing the job I need them to do. So it'll obviously be dependent on what the job spec is saying you're going to be doing. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important, if you do go down the educational route or doing a master's, to try and not forget about getting work experience. And obviously it's tough with all of these demands on your time, but to try and get some experience at the same time. And like you say, the seasonal roles in theory should fit quite nicely around kind of your studies as well. So yeah, try not to leave it until you've graduated to think about getting that work experience on your CV as well.
But I think increasingly a lot of academic, you know, a lot of degrees are fitting practical elements within them. So they will have units for, you know, applied practical skills. So it should be something that you don't necessarily have to do on top of what you're already doing. Hopefully it's something that you can do as a part of it.
Yeah, maybe that's something to kind of look out for when you're choosing a course as well. Okay, thank you. That's really, really good. Did anyone else want to come in on that question, or shall we move on?
I will just quickly, from my sector, it's probably important to say that university is not the only place to get these qualifications either. So lots of what we do in my sector, you can do things level 2 and 3 environmental education or forest school training, which then would give you the background qualification plus the experience. And it's like everyone else has been saying, it's actually a mixture of the two that we're always looking for.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well, Becky, to think, you know, not just the university route, but the other opportunities, and our apprenticeships as well are obviously another way to kind of get a qualification while getting work experience as well. Yeah, thank you. Okay, if there's no one else, so one of probably the biggest, like the most common questions that we had from people signing up to the webinar was just asking for tips on how to get careers related experience, and particularly how to get paid experience if possible. So if anyone has any kind of thoughts on ways of getting work experience and good ways of trying to fit that in, it'd be great to hear any of the panelists comment on that.
Hi, I thought I would have a go at this one because I did my RSPB internship that was unpaid, and after coming out of university I was skint. I'd just been travelling for a few months, which was really stupid because I spent everything I saved. So I was going into this with no money and it was unpaid. So I had to, for the first 6 months, I worked at a local pub in the evenings, And then for the 3 months at the different site, I actually received, job seekers allowance. And that allowed me to build up my skills and start sending my CVs to places whilst getting some support. And it's really difficult, and that's why I would always tell people to try and, if you can do something full-time, like an apprenticeship or an internship, try and find the paid ones, because unless you can find a way of supporting yourself otherwise, it can be quite tricky dedicating yourself full-time for many months. But there's lots of other ways of doing it. So even if you're volunteering one afternoon a week or every 2 weeks, that's enough to build up your skills and to network with the relevant people. And also it shows your commitment as well, because you're having to work around lots of different other commitments, and you're still putting time towards conservation and showing that you love it. So I think even if you've got that half a day every 2 weeks, that should be enough for you to get your skills up and show your commitment.
I should introduce Jonathan. He is our education officer at the South Downs National Park, so he can weigh in a bit on work experience from the authority's perspective and the National Park.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you're still a full-time student, so either in education at school or college, or maybe you're at university, there are a lot of sort of formal routes to find your way into getting work experience with organisations. So at the South Downs National Park Authority, we offer 1 week placements to students who are in years 10 to 13, and we will also support university students who might want to do placements with us as part of a research project they're doing as part of their degree. So we have a list of specific bits of research we're trying to get at the moment, and so we work with universities to identify students that might be able to help deliver that research for us. And we are not the only organisation that's doing that kind of thing. A lot of organisations in this sector will offer that formal 1 week of work experience, especially for students who are still at school or college, so in years 10 to 13. And it's not always the easiest and most explicit thing to find on people's websites, so do absolutely, I can't remember who it was earlier, Kate said she called up Norfolk Wildlife Trust, I think it was, and just said, hello, can I come along? I recommend doing the same sort of thing. If there's an organisation you like the look of and you think you'd like to get a week's work experience with them, just give them a call and ask if it's something they offer, because even if it's not an official formal offer, they may well take that opportunity and say, yeah, actually we've got a bit of time, we could host you for a week. So always reach out and initiate that contact. You never know what might happen.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Hi Beth, can I just add on to that? So when I did my work experience a couple of years ago now, I just picked up the phone and I spoke straight to a ranger, and it was for a week or two, and in that way I got to know the rangers. So when I went back for my apprenticeship interview a couple of years later, they knew me and they recognised me, and that really, really helped, I think, for me to get the job, and for me to get the job as an assistant ranger as well. So picking up the phone, I think, is always, it's hard, but it's always the best way of doing it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That will have helped you get the job, because it builds that confidence. You'll have walked back into that interview feeling so much more relaxed because you're already a bit familiar with the place. Yeah,
exactly.
Definitely making those first contacts is the hardest bit to do, but
it's definitely worth it. 100%.
Yeah, you've been all the way through, James, haven't you? From work experience to apprenticeship to now having a role with the National Park, which is a nice positive story. Does anybody else want to comment on that, or we can move on to another question? We've got an interesting one here. Should you apply for jobs if you lack all of the essential skills required, or is that a waste of time? Becky?
Hello. Yes is the answer. I just replied at the same time as a couple of other
sorry.
We very rarely get everything we're looking for when we're put out a job. I certainly didn't have every job every skill that was on the essentials. What's really nice to see if you haven't got the skill is, or if you are lacking it from the sector, is you applying anything you've had from other jobs or from college or university. I've had some applicants who have never worked in this sector before, but their application has been really clear about what they do know and how they would apply it. And we've asked them to come for interview because actually it's been better written than some people who have come and been in the sector for a long time. So the short answer is don't be afraid, go for it, because no one has everything.
That's great, Becky. I think that's so true. We always think that there's this dream candidate, but you know, when you're writing a job description, you are thinking of the dream person, but they, you know, everybody has weaknesses in some areas and better strengths in others. So yeah, that's a really great.
The dream people rarely exist.
Ralph, do you want to go next, and then Jonathan?
Yeah, I think just one thing I'd add to that is that that question can actually be quite a good route to making contact with someone who's employing you, or who's you know going to be interviewing. It's always quite good, I think, if you can talk to the interviewers beforehand, but sometimes it can be quite difficult to come up with a reasonable question to phone up to ask about. But that could be an excellent one. Just say, I don't have this ticket. I've done a bit of this that's related. You know, maybe I've gone through chainsaw maintenance, but I haven't got the ticket yet. Would you be willing to put me through the training? Something along those lines. That means you've got a point of contact with the person who's going to be sifting through all these application forms, and they may just remember you and think, well, actually, this person took the time to ask about it. They're obviously interested. They obviously want the job. And it may be just that little point of contact's enough to, make them stick in your mind. So yeah, no, I'd say definitely well worth going for things, even if you don't have all the criteria.
Yeah, that is a really good tip I've had in the past about, phoning up and sort of just making yourself stand out, as it were, and stand out in the mind of
But I do think it helps to have a good question to ask, because if you just phone up and it's like, oh, I want this job, and then silence. I mean, you've got to sort of think of something to be the instigator, I think.
Yeah, but I think that is a good tip. Jonathan?
And then just to pick up on something that both Becky and Ralph hinted on there, which is about making clear what your skills are. And Ralph mentioned the fact that when we're employing people, we're sifting through lots of applications. Don't be afraid to make it really foolproof, laying out how your skills and experience meet the skills and experience that have been set out in the job specification or the job advert. Put headlines in, bold text, put it in bullet points, because sometimes when you're applying for these jobs, there might be 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 applicants, and anything you can do on your application to make it really, really easy for the person sifting through them to just quickly identify that you're a good candidate straight away, it will make them keep reading your application for that bit longer. So just make it really, really foolproof. Make it as easy as possible for them to see what skills you've got.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. And Hannah?
Just want to add this has definitely been the case with my current post. When I was looking at the job application, I definitely didn't have all the essential skills needed, and I was definitely lacking in a few of the areas. But just sort of thinking laterally in how you can apply what you've done, not just in this field, but in other areas of your life, and how you can apply that. But also the fact that you don't quite know exactly the candidate they're looking for, and what strengths you're going to bring and how they're going to weigh those strengths up. So definitely sort of knowing the people already who I was applying for a job with probably worked in my favour, and knowing the area helped me a lot as well. So there's lots of different considerations as to just the essential skills they've put on that job application.
Brilliant, thanks Hannah. So I think it's a resounding yes, do apply even if you don't hit all of the essential requirements in the job application, and think about what you would do or say to an employer to be trying to meet those. We've had a question about online volunteering. Obviously at the moment a lot of normal volunteering is kind of on pause. Do any of the panelists know about any kind of from home volunteering or individual volunteering roles that people could get involved with this summer at all? And that's due to COVID, sorry, that a lot of group volunteering or our traditional volunteering roles are kind of suspended. Ralph?
Yeah, not me directly, but within our organisation, we do a bit. So it's data input, basically. Lots of survey data, sometimes historical survey data, that just needs putting into a database. So we have had a few volunteers who've been helping us with that. There's not a huge amount to, certainly from my point of view, running practical volunteer tasks, there's not a lot I've been able to get my volunteers to do, other than solo surveying really on sites. But yeah, so in terms of online stuff, there may be opportunities for sort of species records and data input, that sort of thing.
Yeah, good. And on the National Park website, we do have a kind of whole page about micro volunteering. So those are kind of ways that you can get involved at home through using phone apps and things. And in my project, the Heathlands Reunited project, we've also had people doing kind of archival research about the heritage of our sites, the cultural heritage, which also links into another question that I'll come to in a second. So we have had people doing things that are not necessarily conservation in the field work, but things that can be done kind of desk based. So, but we are always trying to think of ways to kind of diversify our volunteering roles. So yeah, that's definitely something we're thinking about at the moment. Anyone else? Oh, Hannah, yeah.
I think there's not many opportunities I know of at the moment, but I think it's something that organisations are definitely looking into. It's definitely worth keeping your eye out and just seeing what opportunities might be out there. And especially because if it is online, you're not constrained so much at what you can get to in a day. So you might be able to get involved with things more nationally. But I think my experience so far has really been that kind of data input, kind of volunteering that people have been able to do at home.
Okay, great, thank you. Anyone else want to comment on that question? Yeah, it's definitely something that we need more of, I think. And someone asked about marketing and social media roles. So we actually don't have anyone from those roles on the webinar at the moment, but yes, we definitely have marketing and social media people, and we have a communications apprenticeship as well. That's actually Lauren, our current apprentice, is just coming to an end. But yeah, marketing and social media is really important, especially as an authority to what we do to kind of getting those important messages out. So I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that. Oh yeah, Jonathan.
Yeah, although I am not a marketing and media professional at all, I did just put a reply to that question in the box, which is just to say that yes, we do have a core team of professionals, but what the question very specifically asked about drone footage, and if that's something you really enjoy doing, I think more likely is you would set yourself up as a specialist in creating drone footage for conservation organisations. So we don't tend to do a lot of that stuff in-house. We tend to commission specialists and media professionals to do it for us. So the suggestion I made in the Q&A was to start following conservation organisations on social media and then click through to find the professionals that they are using, because we'll always put a tag for the person's photo or video that we've used, and start to get a sense of what they're up to by following their channels.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well, Jonathan, just to get to know the kind of social media channels. Yeah, James?
Yeah, just to add on to the drone side, I think this is something that's really sort of increasing these days. Drone use and surveying is really increasing. Last year I worked with Natural England to do some drone surveying on heathland sites, and they are employing an in-house person to do that now. So there are conservation organisations that are starting to do that, so Natural England is definitely a good one to look at for that.
That's a really good tip, thanks James. So maybe we can try and find a link for that as well and pop that in.
Have a look.
I bow to your knowledge, James. Excellent, thank you.
Brilliant. And we've actually had some volunteer roles all based around photography as well. So we've, in the Heathlands Reunited project, we've been doing fixed point photography monitoring. So volunteers have been going to the same GPS points every kind of spring and autumn and taking photos, and that's helping us to monitor kind of in a very visual way the kind of work that's been done and the progress of the project. So that's quite a new scheme, but it's been going really well. So yeah, that's another kind of example of the different roles that aren't just kind of practical conservation. So Another kind of general question that came in quite a few times when people were signing up was any tips on kind of building those relationships, how to network. We've talked a bit about kind of through volunteering or through kind of work experience, but do any of the panelists have any other tips on how to kind of build your professional network, I suppose, and to get to know more people working in your chosen field? Thanks, Becky.
Twitter, I would say, although it has its evils, it is incredibly good for networking in our sector. Lots and lots of people are on Twitter and are doing kind of really quite amazing things, and you can get to know them and chat to them. Lots of the people that I know in the sector I've never actually met face to face. It's almost always been over Twitter that we've communicated. And conferences are also really good. So there are often student placements or cheaper tickets going if you are still in university or college, and you have to meet people in the line for the coffee and say hello and not be afraid to do that. It can be quite daunting. I find it a bit daunting myself, but it's one of the best ways is to just strike up a conversation. You will almost always be waiting in line at a conference for a cup of tea or coffee, so talk to the person who's next to you.
That's great advice. And as you said, Becky, we've all got that same kind of common goal. In the end, we kind of care about these natural places and the landscapes of the national park, so that you shouldn't feel too daunted in a way, because we do have this kind of common interest, I suppose. But yeah, I also find it quite nerve-wracking to just go up to someone. But yeah, tea and coffee and biscuits are a good starting point for a chat.
While you're in the queue is always a good starting point.
Captive audience, yeah. Brilliant. Cameron, did you want to say something on that as well? You've got your hand up.
Yes, sort of, it's more sort of saying what everybody else has said, but sort of adding to it. Doing a lot of the volunteering stuff, you sort of meet a group of people and you sort of create these close connections with the group, but also with the rangers as well, because you're out with them sort of week on week. There's usually about 3 or 4 rangers that you meet sort of over the course of your volunteering sort of experience. And then doing the youth ambassador stuff, you end up going to a lot of conferences, you do a lot of presentations. I suppose there is a small amount of sort of confidence in trying to sort of put yourself out there, but usually what tends to be the case is a lot of people come up to you and ask what your opinion on a certain aspect is, because 9 times out of 10 I've found that a lot of the attendees for conferences and presentations and meetings tend to be older individuals, maybe in their sort of 30s, 40s and maybe above. So although you maybe like sort of lack the confidence to sort of put yourself out there, there are a lot of others who will sort of come to you for an opinion because you are the young person and they want to know your experience and want to know what your story is. And then once you get to know these people and you build these repertoires and these relationships, you meet them sort of time and time again, and then after that they sort of look at you and go, right, I know you're a trustworthy, reliable individual who knows what he's talking about. And you sort of end up building this confidence sort of yourself, because you end up sort of seeing the similar sort of people and similar minded people, despite sort of an older age.
That's great. So that's allowed you kind of to connect with people across generations as well. And yeah, we really do need to be listening to people of your age as well as people of older ages too. So yeah, that's great. Thanks, Cameron. Kate as well, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just a really quick one with networking. I think it's also really important to network with everybody, a range of people. So not just trying to seek out people who you think might know of opportunities or be able to give you the skills that you need, but even talking to like a local farmer, or if you're doing some work experience on a reserve and there's a contractor around, sort of asking them for tips and advice. And I think just networking with a whole range of people, no matter how high or low they are in an organisation, you never know who's going to be relevant. So try to talk to everybody.
That's a really great tip. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, that's brilliant. Anyone else want to come in on the networking question? Any tips? Shall we move on? So we've had a question about how important is it to be able to drive for your particular role. This might have been answered in the Q&A, but I don't know if anyone had anything to say about that. I mean, traditionally, I think conservation roles, we think of it, you have to be able to drive, but for any of the other roles, have you managed to get by without a car or without driving? Cameron?
Hello again. I found that getting to a lot of the conservation sites themselves, sort of trying to get directly to the managing site, can be a little tricky. But usually, what tends to be the case, and I answered this in the chat and the question and answers, there is a sort of a meeting point that everybody sort of can get to before hopping in a Land Rover and sort of getting to the actual management site. And I think the beauty of being sort of in the South Downs National Park is that there are a lot of sort of train services and bus services that do run between the local villages and the sort of major towns, as it were. And while there are sort of aspects of the national park and areas that are more rural than others and less accessible to public transport, a lot of what I have found doing both the volunteering side as well as the youth ambassador side, there is access. You can, get on a train or get on a bus and get to where you need to be. And usually a lot of the people that you meet, a lot of the rangers or a lot of the other sort of relationships that you gather from these sort of presentations or whatever, are very kind enough to sort of say, oh, well, if you meet me at this part or in this train station or bus stop, we can take you to that particular destination if you need to.
Thanks, Cameron. Yeah, I mean, with our youth action days, which I think the link is in the chat, we do always try to offer a kind of public transport pickup to make it easier for people who don't have a car or can't drive. And yeah, it is hard for some of our more remote sites, but that's great. Thanks, Cameron. And Becky?
I would say for them, the other sort of side of the role, so engagement ones or admin or finance, whatever it is, if you're based at a certain site, then driving a car is not quite so important. With a lot of staff who work from our central office ordinarily, who get the train station's just up the road from where our office is based. So it's not an essential, and in lots of places it will usually, certainly for our roles, one of the things that we will put on our job description is whether or not you need to drive. So do look out for that, but don't let that put you off. Going back to what we were saying earlier, make the phone call, have the conversation.
Yeah, and we do a lot of kind of car sharing, and we have a car share scheme to our central offices. And for example, one of our colleagues doesn't have a car, but it's really never been a problem, because rarely would, in our roles in the engagement and community outreach, would you be going to a site alone necessarily. So it nearly always works out that way. So yeah, it's something that can be worked around, I think. Hannah?
I think it can vary depending on where you live, as well as what organisation you work for. So for instance, I work in a very rural area, and there's no possible way for me to get to work without the use of my own vehicle, really. There's no public transport available. But I know certainly some of the larger organisations, so for instance Yorkshire Dales National Park, and most national parks do have pool vehicles, so even if you don't have your own, there should be access to a work vehicle that you can use. But obviously if you work for a small organisation, that might not be the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have pool vehicles as well, but yeah, it probably does depend on the organisation. Anyone else want to comment on the driving side, or okay? What was the next question I was going to ask? Oh, so we had a question about engagement actually, and that do we think that a lot of engagement is focused on wildlife and the kind of natural environment and less so on the historic environment? Is that the case? And if so, is there a reason for that? And is it difficult, I guess, to advocate for heritage engagement? From my project in particular, we've done a lot of kind of engagement around the heritage of our sites, and we've worked with volunteers to kind of put together a storybook and a education pack for schools about the cultural heritage of the Heathland sites, because they do have a very kind of tight link with humans and human history. So from my personal experience, that hasn't been the case, and actually cultural heritage has been pretty much 50-50 to the natural environment, but of course that might differ with our panelists' experience. So Hannah, yeah, you're a great person to answer this question.
I think there are a lot of cultural heritage engagement opportunities. If there wasn't, I wouldn't have the job I have now. And there are so many jobs out there where people's jobs are to engage with the community with cultural heritage. I think one of the main differences is there's less of those sort of local charities or organisations like the sort of Wildlife Trust, Woodland Trust, and although there is overlap with those organisations with the cultural heritage, there's less of those organisations that are purely focused on cultural heritage. So I think sometimes the opportunities that are apparent that you might be able to see very clearly are just less there maybe, but they definitely are there if you look, I think is the point I'm getting to.
And Becky?
Yeah, I would say, although we are a wildlife trust, cultural heritage is a part of what we do. So very much like you, Beth, a lot of our projects contain kind of a bit of both. So yes, look out for those specific roles, but don't be put off by the fact that we're a wildlife trust or the Woodland Trust or whoever else, because although you might not think it's quite right for you, the roles are out there, even if the organisation doesn't quite fit what you were who you were expecting to work with.
Yeah, that's great, Becky, thank you. And I don't know about in the Wildlife Trust, but as an authority we do work a lot with kind of those smaller museums and galleries in the national park, and we've done quite a lot of collaborations with them. We have a kind of cultural heritage lead who is really active in kind of community projects and engaging people in the national park with their kind of cultural heritage and the history, and so yeah, we do work quite a lot with those organisations.
Yeah, us too, and we're recognising more and more that as much as we'd love everyone to love wildlife for wildlife's sake, often that's not always the case. So we are diversifying a lot of what we do, because we understand that for some people it is about the cultural heritage and that's more important for them, and by helping to protect that or being a part of that, then they will come to wildlife as well. So yeah, the roles are getting more and more diverse as things go on.
Yeah, and I think Rachel pointed out that, you know, a lot of the practical on the ground work is, you know, the rangers need to be aware of public scheduled monuments and how to work around them and not to damage them, and we've actually through our project provided training in that as well. So they're a part of the landscape, and we're very aware of protecting them and kind of promoting them, I guess, as it were. So
yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Just muted myself. We have a really fun question, I think, which is, what is the biggest myth about your job? If anyone wants to weigh in on that. What is the thing that you always have to tell people, well, no, I don't actually spend all day doing that? Ralph?
I think my pet peeve is when people always turn up, members of the public walk past at tea breaks and say, oh, that's lovely, isn't it? Look at you with your feet up and enjoying a cup of tea. And then you think, well, yeah, but we were just working for 3 hours. Like, they always seem to time it right when you're on a break. So I think in a lot of the public's mind, we just spend most of our time sitting around on beautiful sites, drinking tea and eating biscuits.
And cuddling baby lizards.
Exactly,
yeah, that's really good. Jonathan?
Yeah, so just to very quickly say what my job is, I'm the education officer for the park. So I do a lot of our engagement work. I do all of our engagement work in schools with the National Park Authority. And I think a myth is the same, that I get to spend all of my time out and about using, school groups. And my the office, assessment, so it's just very much
Thanks, Jonathan. You went a bit like a robot for me, but that might be my internet.
Yeah, I've just spotted my screen is saying my speaker is not working, so I'll give up now.
Okay, I'm sure it was amazing, whatever you said. Cameron wanted to weigh in on that one.
Yes, so one of the things that when I talk about sort of doing volunteer work or conservation work, I always get the sort of, oh, what's this then? And they'll show me a picture of potentially either a butterfly or a flower or something, and I will sort of shrug my shoulders and go, oh, I don't know, I'm just a volunteer. And I think there's a sort of people think that because you work in sort of national parks that you seem to know sort of an abundance of knowledge about sort of flowers and horticulture and conservation management. So don't be sort of daunted that just because you don't know everything about this, or that you have a specific niche within sort of conservation work, don't feel daunted that you don't know everything, and that people might expect you to answer every single question that they might have. So that's the myth I have.
Brilliant. That's a really good myth and tip, I think. Thanks, Cameron. Hannah?
I would definitely reiterate Cameron's. I think when they know you're involved with the historic environment, sometimes you get a question about any sort of historic environment feature. And it's sort of you don't know about every single thing that you might find in your area. You're obviously going to have particular knowledge bases, but it's that kind of collective knowledge that you have that's going to be the most important. But I think one of those myths of an archaeologist is that you're going to be a man with a big beard and spend most of your day in a trench excavating, and obviously it's much more varied and different to that, and there's so many different job opportunities, and also most people aren't going to spend all their time in a trench, even if that is the role that they do, because there's so much background stuff and preparation work that's needed as well.
So yeah, breaking down some of those stereotypes maybe as well about who can do what role. That's
yeah, definitely.
Anyone else got a myth that they want to take this opportunity to bust about their job? No, you're all happy. Well, I am really aware that it's super, super hot probably for everyone, and you might all be melting a little bit. So I thought we might just finish with a last kind of open question as to if anyone has any kind of lasting tips, something that hasn't come up that they think they'd really like our attendees to know about their particular sector, or any kind of final tips or advice for people for kind of getting on or starting with their kind of first job in this sector. I think mine would probably be to, as I say, kind of if you are studying, that to try and gain a bit of experience alongside that, and to realise that that doesn't have to be kind of like a full-time volunteering role. When you don't have to work for free for long hours. Try to be kind of a bit strategic about how you kind of gain that experience, and the experience that is really kind of relevant to the jobs that you think you want to do in the future. And a good way to find out what that experience is through talking to people that are already doing that job, or people in your careers department if you are still in education as well. And do check out our website, because we've got quite a lot of resources, and we're going to be adding to that from kind of the content that we've been creating as part of this week as well. So does anyone else have any kind of burning tips or advice they'd like to give to the attendees? Thanks, Ralph.
I'll do one. Yeah, I think don't be afraid to ask questions. I think I was definitely guilty of this when I was younger, and someone who I looked up to in conservation would say some term that I hadn't come across before, and I'd think, oh well, I can't let on that I don't know what that is. and I just go along with the conversation and sort of try and work out what they're talking about. And it's just silly. Don't be afraid. No one in this industry is going to be sort of belittling you for not knowing something. We're all trying to engage people about wildlife, about the natural environment. You know, we want people to learn. So I think don't feel that asking a question about something that you think you maybe should know is a sign of weakness. It's not. It's a sign of interest and you know, dedication. So that's what I would say.
That's a really good point. And I think just being honest as well about what you do and what you don't know is quite important, especially in our field. Kate has a question, has an answer, sorry.
Yeah, I would definitely second Ralph's answer there. I've asked so many questions. I still ask loads of questions now, you know, when I'm out with Forestry Commission and they're using all these terms about their forestry works, and I'm going, what on earth does that mean? You know, just don't be afraid, because people are happy to share their knowledge. But yeah, my tip would be, what would be my tip? I've just forgotten. Yeah, just go for every role. If you're not a specialist, don't worry. I was a generalist. Even when I was applying for jobs, I didn't know what I wanted to do or what I was interested in. So I would definitely say don't feel a pressure to go down a particular path or choose a certain species or habitat to focus on. If you're a generalist, there are loads of roles that really play on that, and you can explore what you're interested whilst you're in the job.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Kate, especially early on. Try and keep your options open, I suppose, and like we've been saying, try and learn about as many different things as possible, because it, you know, it might be what you think you like isn't necessarily what you like, but if you've kept your options open, then you can go down different paths, can't you?
Yeah, there's no pressure.
Yeah, that's great. And James, did you want to say something? Or sorry if I'm
I was just adding on really to what Ralph and Kate said. They both covered it. No question's a silly question. Just ask away, and it's the only way you'll learn, really. And say, as we've all said, say yes to everything and just get involved.
Brilliant. Any other tips, or shall we? Okay, well, thank you so much to all of our panelists. I've really enjoyed today. I've really enjoyed learning about all your different career paths, and I think I've picked up a few tips along the way as well. Yeah, so please do check out our webpage, as I said, and I'll be sending a follow-up email with some links to things that have come up today, and we'll hope to make the recording available somehow to you guys as well if you want to refer back to it. But thanks everyone for coming, and thanks for all your brilliant questions as well. I think it's been a really interesting discussion and a really positive day for me. So thanks again.